Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back for another bookish conversation with a children's literature author and illustrator. Today, I'm talking with Sabrina and Eunice Moyle. They are the sisters behind the Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella graphic novel series, along with lots of other delightful books, including Bananas for You, School is Cool, ABC Dance, and Potty Power. Not to mention, My Dad is Amazing and My Mom is Magical, two of my favorites. They're here today to discuss their newest book in their graphic novel series, The Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella, Comet Together. I can't wait to discuss not only their books, but their other creative adventures together too. So let's get right to it. Sabrina, Eunice, welcome to KidLit Love. I am so glad the two of you are here today.
We are so excited to be here, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Hello.
I mentioned that I love having the author and the illustrator of the books together. It is such a great synergy, but you're sisters, so we've got like double the synergy going on today. So I have a feeling it will be a really fun conversation. I would like the backstory. I would like to know how two sisters came together to not only write books together, but have greeting card companies together and do all sorts of creative things together. So I would love to have one of you start at the beginning and just kind of tell us the story.
Yeah, we would be happy to. I'll start us off. So Eunice and I are the only two siblings in our family. Eunice is 2 years older than I am, but we're close enough that people often mistake us for twins, and did when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Our dad was in the Foreign Service, and our mom is from Taiwan, and they met in Taiwan. And so we grew up moving every 2 to 3 years, going to international schools and just kind of traveling all over the world. And we didn't move to the United States until we were 15. Our mom
Or
was
18 in my case, 17, senior in high school. Very
right.
big change.
Yes.
Exactly. So our mom was this super creative homemaker who like quilted and sewed, and she just is a total spitfire. And I think she is partly where we got a lot of our creative inspiration.
And our work ethic.
And our work ethic, extremely hard charging. And our dad is also very creative. He would do like lino cut wood. He was a musician. So there was just a ton of creativity in our family. Plus, on top of that, with moving around all the time, Eunice and I kind of only had each other. Plus, this is like Asia in the 80s, and like we were living
No internet.
No internet. Like we were living in communist China for like 3 years, where there's like no American TV, nothing. Like, so we were like starved for any type of toys, TV, cartoons, any of that. So we really only had our imaginations to rely on. So Eunice and I, from the time we were really young, would like stay up late making up stories, especially every time we moved to a new country. We would imagine like, what's the next school going to be like? What's our next bedroom going to be like? You know, like, so we were just always super creative together. And Eunice, I mean, has loved to draw us, and she could hold a crayon.
Yeah, that's my one clear talent.
And I've always loved all kinds of art. So I used to do theater, I used to do music. I've always loved to write, but I didn't really think of myself as a writer until I was 40. So fast forward to when we actually had our company and started writing children's books. That's actually when I started realizing that I was a writer and had a lot to say. So that was kind of how I think that our creative partnership and collaboration really started, was as children, kind of designing and drawing our own dollhouse furniture out of cardboard, making up stories with like stuffed animals. Like all of this was really how it all started for us. And then fast forward, Eunice ends up going to art school. I go to liberal arts college and study art history. And then we both wound up in the Bay Area around 2000. Eunice was working for a web design firm, and I had gone to Stanford Business School because I was working kind of in the nonprofit art sector and I wanted to help artists become more self-sufficient. So I decided to get a business degree. And then Eunice got a press on eBay. And Eunice, you can tell the story about how.
Well, I took
Well, let me
one
start.
class. I have a real problem with crafts and learning new crafts, which is that
It's
if
only
I
a
like it,
problem if you decide it's a problem.
that's true. If I like it, I cannot help but go down a rabbit hole and just like I'm all in, you know. And so I took one class from Center for the Book and Letterpress, and a week later I had bought a press off of eBay and was learning to print things on my own because I didn't have the money to have anything printed. So I figured I would just do it myself. And I was working at a pet store part-time because I was a freelance illustrator, which is a very like, you know, famine or feast or famine sort of situation. So I was working at a like fancy pants pet store and they needed some cards. And so I made them some cards and they sold. And I was like, this could be a thing maybe. And Sabrina was in business school. So she was like, this could definitely be a thing. And yeah, and it just kind of snowballed from there, really. Like I just started making my first custom job was for a a birthday party for Bruno, a Chihuahua.
Oh, no way.
Invitation, for real.
I feel like we need to write a children's book about that someday, Eunice.
Bruno the
Yes.
Chihuahua.
Yeah.
That would be hysterical. Okay, so then
Yeah.
how we got into publishing was that eventually we had kids. So we have 5 kids between us, and we've been doing greeting cards and we did custom invitations, such as the Chihuahua invitation, but mostly weddings, a lot of high-end weddings. And it was just so stressful. We were like, okay, we've got kids. We need to like downscale somehow. And so we partnered with a company called Egg Press in Portland, Oregon to print our greeting cards. And then we got a product agent basically to work with us to start licensing our creative work. And so initially we were licensing to like Paperless Post and we did more greeting cards, but then she loves publishing. And so she had a connection with Abrams, our publisher in New York. And she was like hell bent on trying to get us into the publishing world because she loved books so much. And
Yeah.
it had always been a childhood fantasy of ours, but we, didn't think that necessarily we would be able to cut it. And so, and we had published a couple of books, like we published some craft books while we were doing the greeting cards. And we did one called Handmade Weddings, which is all about DIY weddings, but not
Craft books, not as fun as children's books.
not as fun as
at all.
children's. So anyway, so Abrams was looking for a freelance illustrator or illustrator for a project that they already had a manuscript for. It was called the Celebrate Today Journal, and it was like this illustrated gift journal. And so we signed on to just do work for hire for that and illustrated. Eunice illustrated, and I kind of helped concept and art direct a lot of the illustrations for this, all the illustrations for this, and some notebooks. And once they realized how easy we were to work with, they were like, "Hey, I think they saw that they had a little bit of a gold mine here, so they let us."
That's our superpower, is that we're really nice to work with and we're on time.
And we're really
Apparently
fast.
not a common trait.
Yes, exactly. And so we ended up getting an appointment to meet with the children's book editor there, and I kind of just came up with a bunch of children's book ideas, and we pitched to them. And they liked a couple of them, and it just so happened that they were looking for board book titles for Mother's Day and Father's Day, sort of new moms and new dads, and that's kind of how My Mom is Magical and My Dad is Amazing came about. Yeah. And so we pitched our ideas for that. They loved them, and then from there, we've published over 25 books. We've gone from board books to picture books to graphic novels with them. We have an exclusive with them where we publish 4 books a year. And even last year, we did a partnership through them with Marvel, where we created this sort of gift book. We started a gift book series, and the first one has Captain Marvel, and we're doing a Spider-Man one this year, which are kind of like 1 to 4 panel cartoons that put superheroes in everyday situations that are really humorous. So anyway, so it's been this wonderful explosion of creativity in publishing. We absolutely love it. We still do cards and, we do kids puzzles and games and some other things, but our happy place by far is writing for kids. It's just been a dream come true.
Well, I'm in my happy place right now, just listening to you two go back and forth about how this really just started as kids. It's like what you were doing by yourselves together is now what you're doing, just the world gets to benefit from it, from the cards to the books to the projects. Like I can just feel the energy that comes off of.
And I definitely have massive Peter Pan syndrome, so I really relate to children.
Yeah.
I'm still basically a child
Yeah.
stuck in an adult body.
I think we all are. I think, that's part of why I love um of course I love my own podcast, but why I really think that this podcast is great because it's children's literature for children, but we all have those inner children still in us that we are reading to, that only children's
Mhm.
literature and that playful nature, the crafting, the joy, the do it for the only reason of that it is fun. We all still have that inside. And it
Mhm.
takes a book. It takes something usually to unlock it. And I can just feel all sorts of like doors unlocking in my own soul right now as you talk, because I was the kid, I was the doodler. I wasn't a very good
Ah,
doodler, but I loved, and you saw my bucket with all my markers. I don't go anywhere without multiple colored Sharpies or gel pens to just doodle. And I had an obsession when I was a kid. I didn't know what it was called at the time. I know what it's called now, but I could hand letter for hours to just write my name and write quotes and try it in bubble letters and squiggly letters. So when you talked about the letterpress, I was like, oh my goodness, that little
oh,
girl is like being so excited to be able to talk to you too today. Oh, I love it. I can just feel the creativity coming through the screen.
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah. It was a dream come true to be able to make. There's something about making your own
Yeah.
cards, printing them yourself, just seeing a
Mhm.
project through from start to finish. It was so,
Right.
so
Well,
satisfying.
it also gives you so much control and it gives you the ability to experiment because, printing is really expensive and it's really limiting. Like when I first batch of cards that I had printed in an offset printer, it had to be only two colors and you had to make sure that all the cards have the same two colors so you could save money. Whereas if you're doing it yourself, you have the, opportunity to play a little more.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm gonna go Google what that whole process looks like so I can
Oh,
imagine.
it's so satisfying.
Right?
It's also so old school because the first press that I got was from the 1940s. So it's all sort of gears and rods and
Yep.
cranks, and it's just very satisfying.
Yes.
Just it's a very satisfying thing to do.
Oh, yeah. I have my father-in-law's old typewriter that
Oh,
doesn't quite work still yet. I'm trying to find someone that can fix it. And there is just something about that old school, really get your
oh,
hands, do it
pressing the
yourself.
buttons.
Yeah, it feels so good, like you said, to be
Yeah.
able to have that product in your hands. And you've had greeting cards, you've had board
Mhm.
books, you have picture books, and today we're talking about your graphic novels. So this is a series, and listeners, I was saying before we hit record, I'm actually holding four of the series in my hand, and they're quite huggable. They are the perfect size for a reader to hug close to their chest, but they're these nice, thick books that are early chapter graphic novels that I can just picture so many kids so darn proud to have a hardcover of this size in their hands. That's a chapter book, but is so much fun. So much fun. So I would love to hear how this series came to be. How did the Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella pop onto your radar, and how did you bring it to life?
Oh my gosh, it's a great story. Well, so we had done word books and picture books with our publisher, and they wanted us to try early reader graphic novels, right? To continue the relationship with our readers. And so they asked us to pitch them some graphic novel ideas. And our first series idea, which we kind of did some rough sketches for, was the League of Ordinary Objects. So
I totally forgot about that.
it was like all these anthropomorphized little like everyday objects having like that you would find around the house, like staplers,
Like a fork.
or like a fork, having like really hilarious adventures. And so we pitched that to them, but they kind of realized they're like, I don't think kids are really going to gravitate towards these inanimate objects so much. And
Would?
I know. Like put a pin in that. Maybe that'll be our next draft.
Right? It's
Maybe
sort of
that's your
like
next
Toy
adult book.
Story where
Yeah, that could be your next adult
toys
one.
come
If
to
you could have
life
some
and
fun.
But there's
Yeah.
something when I was in college, I studied it was called the built environment, and we studied everyday things. Like I did a research paper on the lipstick dispenser. So I've always been like obsessed with like everyday objects like the pencil, the ballpoint pen, like they're so amazing, right? So that was kind of the genesis, the idea. But then our publisher was like, no, I don't think there's a market for that. Is there something else? And so we had this card that said, I hope your birthday is out of this world. that had a unicorn in an astronaut outfit on it. Like pink and holographic foil. It was just like this funny, quirky little card that Eunice, this doodle of this unicorn that Eunice had done. So they kind of, I think they maybe saw that and were like, what about this unicorn? Can you do something with this space unicorn? You know, we're like, yeah, sure. How about some buddies in space? And so we're like, what would be a really hilarious foil to a unicorn in space? How about we thought it had to be something small. So we're like, how about a flying squirrel who's like trying really hard to be magical, but like can't quite fly. She can only glide, you know? And so that was kind of the genesis of like, it was these two characters. And then I've been watching a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine at the time. And
I love that show so much.
I love the character of Captain Holt, who's like super deadpan. So we were like, okay, well, they can't just be on their own since they're kids. We need some sort of parental figure, right? Sidekick. And we wanted to have some like gadgety STEAM elements in. So we're like, okay, we're going to make a robot and his name is going to be Bobo, which I think is robot in French and Eunice is a total.
It's like, yeah, it's like kind of Frenchish because I speak fluent French. So there's all these little like French sort of things in there.
Yeah. So then we're like, okay, he'll be super deadpan because he's a robot, but he might be kind of on the spectrum or something, but like he's really, really funny and super
literal.
Yeah. And very, very literal. Right. And so it started with those three characters. And then we're like, okay, let's have this be inspired by our childhood, because literally when we were kids, we would get on these huge like Boeing 747s that felt like spaceships. Like people were smoking and there was no iPad.
Oh God, people were smoking.
And we were like just waiting to get to the next place. And it'd be like 18 hours bored to death on this plane, you know, and then we'd land in a new country. And it was like being on a different planet, literally. So we were like, okay, well, let's do it in space and have the focus be on friendship, social, emotional learning, kind of bridging differences, right? Connecting with people across lines of difference, which is something I do a lot of nonprofit work around as well. I'm very passionate about this. And so we're like, okay, this is the perfect platform for us to have these characters explore new planets, meet different types of people, and learn lessons around friendship. So their spaceship is called the Friendship. And learn lessons about self-awareness, about interpersonal dynamics, communication, et cetera, along with obviously just like good old fashioned, like beating the bad guy and like, you know, rescuing, you know, saving the day and like just, you know, all the usual kind of heroic antics that we just, that are.
And these lessons are cleverly hidden like you know, spinach and lasagna amidst fart jokes and hilarious shenanigans.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. I believe that is the beauty and the magic in your books, because they are these really fun, adventurous, funny things that are going on. But then you get these bigger themes of we can do hard things. Progress, not perfection, right? Those are big themes, but they're so seamlessly built that it's just this natural thing that kids are picking up as they are having these crazy fun adventures and zooming off to these different places. And that's really hard to do in a book that keeps kids' attention and laughing. And oh, by the way, this is a social emotional curriculum, you know,
right?
Inside
Sneaky style.
Yes, totally. I'm so glad you picked up on that, because that is like the social emotional curriculum is a huge part, but we try really hard to sneak it in.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you did. And so I'm going to ask you how, because first of all, you're sisters that work together. You're author and illustrator. So how does the idea go from, I think we're going to write about this, to here's what it looks like? Is it words first and then Eunice comes in with the pictures? Is it all mixed up together? How do you end up bringing it from idea to this beautiful glossy hardcover that I have in my hand?
Yes. So we start with words, and I just want to apologize. My thing keeps pinging, and I thought I had turned everything off, and it keeps popping up. So apologies for the little pings in the background. I hopefully have turned it all off by now. But anyway, how it comes from how it goes from concept to fruition. It starts with words. Well, obviously the whole series started with pictures. So Eunice's unicorn was by far like the inspiration and the jumping off point. And I know that as I write additional books, I look back to the original books, like the past books for inspiration as well. So as we collect more in the series, all of the past books become fodder and inspiration visually for all the amazing things that Eunice brings in the illustrations. But for a given book, I will start with a synopsis of each each chapter. So kind of an overall theme that I'm thinking about, and then a synopsis for each chapter. And I'll write that just like in a paragraph type form. And run that by our editor to make sure that she's kind of down with the basic arc of each story. And then I will write it all out as though I was writing a script. So I very much see these as like, you know, kind of like writing a script for TV, you know, because you're dealing with graphic novels. So anyway, so I write all the dialogue, and I sometimes have art prompts and stuff in there, and I do all the pagination, and then Eunice looks at it and she kind of adds feedback and whatnot. And then our editor reviews it, gives feedback, and sometimes there's some rework, but generally it's been pretty light on the rework. And then Eunice goes into sketches. And then Eunice, do you want to talk about that process?
Yeah, I mean, and then I just go into sketches, and it really just depends. I mean, I really try to sort of imbue the characters with real sort of like kid-like emotion. Like, so for example, there's a passage where they're really bored, and I just remember so clearly being a kid and having to wait around Chinese restaurants. Our parents would take us to Chinese restaurants, and then they would argue over the bill with their friends for 30 minutes. And I just remember being like under the table and like rolling around in my chair and like just being like, ah, you guys are killing me. And I just really try to get a lot of that physical humor into the images. So yeah, that's just one example of the physical humor. But physical humor to me is like really key. But yeah, and then I mean, and then what Sabrina writes is so hilarious. So it's just, and so absurd that it's really like, yeah, I love making things completely absurd, possibly a little like wacky and psychedelic and like, you know, nutty. Yeah. And so I just run with it, honestly. Like she gives me a really good scaffolding from which to base illustrations off of.
So do you start paper pencil, or I guess
I
writing in
mean, I
pencil?
used to.
You,
I used to, but now I honestly do everything on the iPad, and it's just an amazing efficiency that allows me to do so much more work. Yeah, I mean, there was back in the day, I used to carry a scanner around with me, even on vacation, because that's how much of a workaholic I was. I have this huge scanner in my suitcase, even on my honeymoon, I might add. But yeah, so now it's just all on the iPad, and it's a fantastic tool.
yeah, I couldn't help, as I'm looking at your illustrations, because as I said, I loved hand lettering. I've attempted. I've attempted, and I will say, preparing for our interview today made me think, okay, I'm going to get my iPad back out and I'm going to try this. I'm going to be creative. What I
Yeah.
loved, well, there were lots of things I loved, but the things that jumped out at me, number one, I loved the change in font, how it went from the characters that were speaking or the robot that was speaking.
Yes.
That made me very happy. There were bubble letters throughout
Oh,
here.
I love doing lettering too, so I'm with you on like
Yeah,
fun lettering.
I was just very happy looking at all of that. But then when you look at the pages, you've got these bright backgrounds, depending on the book, of course, but these bright backgrounds, and then some of the backgrounds are more of a changing in gradation of the colors,
Yeah.
and the others are textures. I loved the variety of it, and I can just imagine kids kind of leaning in, like imagining like, oh, could I please just jump? Could I
Yeah.
just jump, into the pages and imagine myself there. They're just so bright, and
Yeah.
it just, yeah,
Well, and
they just grab you.
I love adding lots of hilarious little details that like you maybe wouldn't notice right away, but like there's a singing toilet in one, one of the stories that's based on one of those, like I think, wasn't it like, yeah, Sabrina was in Japan with her family, and she sent us a video of her son like behind the door, obviously, but like he was using the very fancy high-tech Japanese toilet and just like giggling because it was so absurd. So so it was such an absurd experience. So that really inspired this like singing toilet with a disco ball. It has like a disco ball. It
Yes.
has like a song list. It has, like a seat warmer and like all kinds of like gadgets around it. Anyway, so definitely I like to make sure that the photos, the illustrations have like layers of detail. So even if you reread it, you find like funny little Easter eggs in there that you didn't see the first time.
Yeah. Well, that I think is also the beauty of a graphic novel. I love giving graphic novels to kids who are perhaps reluctant readers because
My
they
kids.
really, yeah, some of mine too draws them in, or kids
Yeah.
who have had difficulty learning literacy perhaps as quickly as we would like, because there's something about a series and there's something about graphic novels, right? Those pictures are accessible. And it's
Yes.
so much easier to wrap your head around that story when you can make that visualization in your head. And then
Mhm.
if you can take all of that with you to the next book, it makes jumping in easier, which makes it easier for that child to take that leap. And once I love handing out series like this, because once I know I have them on book one, like I've got them for the rest of them. So I'm so glad you already have multiple
Totally.
books in here.
Totally. Yeah, my daughter is like not a huge reader, and she's a very harsh critic, and she loves this series. So I take that as a good sign because she's very cynical.
Yes, it's the highest compliment.
Yeah, and I will note the first book in the series is the simplest in terms of language, and it was kind of intentional with that idea, like let's hook as many reluctant readers as possible.
Yeah.
And then language does get a little bit more sophisticated with the subsequent
Mhm.
books. And because we do also want to, I love wordplay and playing with language and introducing them to kind of exciting and fun new words to say. And then we also have the idea that, I still read with my kid,
Yeah.
my who's 12, like reading together, I think is just such an important thing to do for families at bedtime, even as kids are able to read on their own. So like when my kids were young, I read Calvin and Hobbes to them all the time. And we
Oh,
would sit
yeah.
together,
Calvin and Hobbes is like our North Star.
so for all of our books, like you say, children's books are for adults and kids at the same time.
Mhm.
Like all of our books, there's so many jokes and layers in there and language that are really intended to engage and excite and entertain the adult who might be
Yeah.
reading alongside the kid. So,
Totally. Like there's one, the thing that always sticks in my head, there's one where like I think one of the characters is crying and Bobo comes rolling in and goes, diaper for your face. Like, and
Yes.
I just find that so funny, like diaper for your face. It's just like such a hilarious
I love
way to
that one.
say it.
Yes. I love that. That's when I was thought, okay, this is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun
It's
experience.
like so ridiculous.
So let's talk about your newest release in that series, Comet Together. I have to admit, my reading teacher and writing teacher heart was very happy to see in chapter 1 that they were writing. For
yeah.
the listener that has not read or had the chance to browse this book, could you give us a little overview of what this particular book in the series is about?
Absolutely. So they're bored to death because they read comic books instead of comic books because they're in space. They're bored with all their comic books and they are trying to figure out what to do. And Bobo gives them the suggestion of creating their own. And so we very much want, and so they decide to try. And very much like Eunice and my relationship, Stella, who's modeled after me, she's the flying squirrel, decides to write the story, and Astrid, the unicorn, decides she's going to draw the pictures. So they try to do it, and we show the creative process, which is a really cool, fun sneak peek because it's based on our actual creative process. But then when they come back together, Astrid is like really not happy with Stella's illustrations.
But other way around. Stella's not happy with Astrid's
Stella's not happy with Astrid's illustrations. That's right. And this happens to Eunice and I all the time because we have to give each other feedback. Or like, oh, this isn't quite working. That's not quite working. Obviously, this is something kids have to deal with all the time. And the fear of getting criticized or the fear of feedback. And how do you give constructive feedback? So, Stella does not give feedback very skillfully. And, Bobo intervenes a little bit.
She's rude. Let's face it. She's rude.
Yeah. Bobo intervenes a little bit with a little bit of templating on how to give a little bit more, slightly more effective feedback later in the book. But then, so they decide to huff off and go and do it themselves. And so they each do everything. And of course, Astrid has amazing illustrations, but she's not really a storyteller. So her story is like completely random. There's like turtle ball, like there's like random things that are coming through. You're like, what is happening in the story? But it's really fun to draw. And then Stella's story is like really exciting. There's like a plot and a protagonist and an antagonist, but she only can draw stick figures. So it's like total chicken scratch.
Totally inspired by my daughter's early drawings.
Yeah.
I totally cribbed off of her early drawings.
Yeah, so they come back together and just like, existential crisis. They're both so frustrated that they can't do both well, right? And then you get a flashback. Bobo kind of tells them like, look, not everyone's meant to do everything perfectly. And you get to see a flashback of baby Bobo when he was little. And of course, because he's a robot, he hates messy stuff. He hated making macaroni noodle necklaces. He hated all these things. So he like explains to them, look, we each have our own unique genius. You don't have to be good at everything. Like give it another try. And so they give it another try, and it ends up being super successful, and they like crank out all these amazing Comet books, and by the end of the story they're off to the book fair, the interplanetary book fair on planet Libros to share the outcome of their creativity.
Yes. And I love the last thing that Bobo says in that chapter is books are like rocket ships. They can take us anywhere we want to go. And that's it. We can escape anywhere as long as we have the pages in the book.
And that is a tried and true sort of, elementary school poster that I'm sure hangs in many so reinforcing the message of teachers everywhere.
Yes.
Yes.
And so then in the coming chapters, like they are on some other adventures. They get into some more shenanigans in the other chapters. Do you want to give a little preview of those as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So chapter 2, they kind of confront AI, the idea. I mean, I wanted to kind of introduce the idea of AI because it's in the news and kids are hearing about it and even using it at school. So they read a report from Planet Earth that, robots are evil. Oh my gosh. And they're like, wait a second, Bobo, our best friend is a robot. Is he evil? Then in a sort of like Christmas Carol-y style sort of structure, Bobo comes in to show them 3 different planets where, robots are taking, 3 different roles. And it's really kind of exploring what the different possible sort of futures and ways in which technology can play a role in our lives. And I won't give away what happens, but essentially, they kind of come to the sort of Goldilocks planet, which is where Bobo actually grew up, where, Bobo's tagline throughout the series is at your service. He's always at your service. And so they get to go to his home planet, where they get to meet his dad and realize, oh, wait, actually, robots can be really wonderful if they have this kind of at your service mindset and are really trying to be helpful. And so that's kind of the conclusion. So that's the book 2 or chapter 2 of the book. And then the final chapter, our publisher wanted us to introduce a new character, potentially who could have their own series. And so we thought of the idea of this character named Time Travel Tiger, who travels across dimensions and planets to collect inventions, and gadgets and understand them and see how they could be used and to spread this technological insight across planets. And so there, Astrid and Stella are suddenly at the situation where Bobo's sick and he usually helps them with their adventures and navigation. And so they have to navigate on their own. And so they land on a planet and they have to kind of figure out how to make friends with these strange birds, the toodles who talk out of their butts. And Time Travel Tiger kind of stumbles in through a portal and he's able to kind of introduce them to these gadgets that become these wonderful kind of tools of exchange with the toodles for them to be able to make friends with them and also acquire these like wonderful gem-shaped fruits that the toodles have growing on the trees all over the place. So there's a sort of lesson in there, I suppose, about manners and being a guest in somebody else's country, right? And how to exchange and reciprocity. Being respectful, right? While at the same time, Time Travel Tiger teaches them about kazoos and hammocks and these cool, get a little bit of that too. So that's the final chapter of the book. And they're just 3 very separate and really fun adventures that happen throughout the book.
Yeah. And I mean, hearing that, every single listener is thinking, this book is fun. Like when you have a character that talks out of their butt.
Right? Obviously. Somebody should talk out of their butts.
Every child, every boy, right? Another reluctant population sometimes
yes.
is going to want to get their hands on this very, very fun book. And so I would love to ask both of you, I think I know what you're going to say, but what is your hope for the series? To have readers, they're reading this book, it's in their hands, they close that last page. What's your hope for readers?
Our hope is that they'll just really have loved reading them, that it will have brought them a lot of joy. Again, Calvin and Hobbes is kind of our gold standard humor and for the quality of the art. we want them to see themselves in the Astrid and Stella characters. These are flawed characters with frustrations. They get into kind of sibling-like fights with each other. They're just funny. They're just really funny. So we want them to see that, but the books like Calvin and Hobbes kind of carry through a lot of wisdom, a lot of which comes through Bobo and through their adventures. And I think we also just want them to feel that sense of safety and security that kids get when they are actually learning useful tools and skills that they can apply in their own lives, and there is some of that teaching that's going on in a subtle way throughout the book. So we hope that just like in Calvin and Hobbes, you get these really deep life lessons in philosophy. There's layers that you can come back to.
But you remember what a hilarious series it was, like for the rest of your life,
Correct. That this is something that readers can come back to over and over. I mean,
when they have their own kids.
When they have their own kids. And as an adult, this is my favorite book series. And these are my favorite books that we've worked on because I love reading them. I teach them to my middle grade kids and they love reading them. So I think our hope is that this will be, an onboarding to literacy, but it'll also hopefully be a perennial series that kids will love to come back to later when they're older. And it just hopefully will, obviously it's a really, really high bar, but again, Calvin and Hobbes, we just want it to thing that appeals to everyone and that has something for everyone in the sense of just the humor and the timeless wisdom that's embodied in the stories.
Yeah. These are the kind of books, we all have books on our bookshelves that when we look at them, we think, oh, I remember that book. Or you could take it back to your childhood, or you remember the favorite cover of the book that you've had. And I started the episode saying these are the perfect size, they're hardcover, they're bright. And even when they were just up on my children's literature bookshelf, they stand out. And they stand out for a good reason. These are going to be covers that when a child sees them, or a child fast forward 20 years sees them and thinks, that's right, that was the book, because it does just have this wonderful fun, yet, like you said, those themes that teach and really touch the heart at the same time of just having a really good time. And that's what I think reading is, right? To have fun, to enjoy it, but you walk away with something in addition to that. And all of these books, this entire series, it does it. You can't read it and not smile, which in today's world, what better gift is there?
And I also love the idea of teaching kids humor and what a good sense of humor is. And I feel like these books are so witty, they're so funny, they're clever. And I feel like it's just a very good way to sort of learn about humor in the same way I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a brilliant at teaching humor.
I don't know that. I'm going to go look it up now after
it's such a clever show. It's hilarious.
I will put that on my watch list. I do want to end with one more question that isn't related to the series, but is just related to your work in general. Because like I said, I can feel the creativity oozing out of the Zoom screen and I'm soaking it in. I'm enjoying it. What advice would you give listeners to keep that creative spark going? I mean, you've started together as young sisters with these, creative efforts, just the two of you, and now you're sharing them with the world. Do you have any advice for people who just want to feel the kind of energy that you're feeling around this creating and reading and writing and living that you have? I'm being selfish, but I really want to hear it.
I feel like it's all about constantly learning and I feel like I get a lot of creativity from a lot of different things. I roller skate, I sew, I knit, and all of that just sort of fires up that creative engine and keeps the fires burning. So I think it affects everything I do, and so I'm always really excited to create, because I'm just everything I do in my life, I try to constantly be creating, even if it's not literally drawing.
Yeah.
What about you, Sabrina?
Yeah. And I think, it's funny. I hosted a brunch yesterday that was all about creativity for women, and it was through this organization called Happy Women Dinners, which brings women together around different sort of self-transformation type themes. And this one was about creativity. And I think one of the biggest things is that often we don't give ourselves permission to be creative and to think of ourselves as creative because we've had it beaten out of us. Like, I totally get why parents are afraid of their kids growing up to become artists, because it is really hard to make a living as an artist. But somehow through that messaging, a lot of people get the idea that they can't be creative, that it's not viable, it's not acceptable, it's not whatever. And they lose connection with that sense of themselves and their own creative voice, which is such a tragedy, which is, again, partly why we did in Astrid and Stella Comet Together, to show them creating, because there's so many opportunities to be consumers in our culture, but we want kids to be creators, not consumers, and maybe consume to create as fodder, like so that you can then work it into your own creative output, right? So I agree with Eunice in that there's give yourself permission, think of yourself as a creative person, and try to shut off the peanut gallery or whatever, all the voices that are being like, oh no, you can't do that, perfect enough or whatever, right? Be willing to just learn, as Eunice said, like try new things and suck at it for a while. I mean,
totally.
We did greeting cards for 15 years and I didn't think of myself as a writer, but really that was all practice for making children's books. It was words and pictures, but it was in this really constrained format, right? And that takes me to also, like, feel free to do something that's more constrained. Don't start with a blank page. Like one of the women
who can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. One of the women who's speaking at this event yesterday, Stephanie Chin, has these wonderful coloring books, right? Where you're coloring, but there's lines there and they're very inspiring messages that you're coloring as well. So it's okay to start with a coloring book. Like, you don't have to do it all yourself. Just get the juices flowing. And then over time, you can branch out and become a little bit more creative, like experiment more with a blank page. And that's with visual art. But yeah, I mean, as Eunice said, you can be creative. You go ahead.
Well, one of my favorite things, I mean, I take class, like I take classes all the time. Like I take classes on how to roller skate. I take dance classes and I have 2 left feet and I'm so physically dyslexic and I've become so much better and I love it, even though I'm not awesome at it, not by a long shot, but I have confidence in it now because I've taken lots of classes. I feel like there's so much cool content. I mean, even just YouTube is an amazing resource for learning how to do pretty much anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I take voice lessons. I started taking a clay class with my 12-year-old together, and we were throwing on the wheel, which is something I used to do in college. I taught myself how to arrange flowers by watching YouTube videos, and a friend of mine would get together and have flower play dates. So we'd get a bunch of cheap flowers from Trader Joe's, come together, hang out, have lunch, and do flower arranging based on teaching ourselves off YouTube. Yeah. And it's like super creative and so much fun, so totally. I think realizing there's so many avenues for being creative, and just pick something that speaks to you and then just start learning, just mess around. And that's great.
Cooking can be amazing creativity. Like, honestly, like anything, carpentry, really totally creative. Would love to learn.
She knits, like whatever it is, I think the definition of being creative is being in a state of flow, right? Whatever gets you into that state of flow where your analytical brain is kind of turned off, or you're just kind of going with the flow, doing whatever it is, even if it's journaling or whatever, doodling, whatever it is, like that's what it feels like to be creative. So whatever gets you there, is go for it. Like, do that.
Such good advice. I love it. Give yourself permission, really embrace that creative identity. And then it sounds like just say yes to some things and see where
and be okay with sucking at it. It's okay to suck. That's where everybody starts, So.
Right. And when you're creative,
don't be afraid of sucking.
Right. Do it for you. Do it for you. It's for your own voice and for your own well-being, not to perform and to please.
Or to impress anybody.
No.
Totally.
Creativity is just you doing it for you. Yeah.
I wish I lived closer to the two of you and could just soak it in person and be at one of those dinners. So what is next for the two of you? Speaking of continuing to be creative, do you have any projects in the works that you could give listeners a sneak peek into before we sign off?
I mean, a few.
We have first of all, we're finalizing the book 5 of the Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella. This one's called Blast from the Past, and this is actually one where the story talk about like leveling up readers. This time the story goes through all 3 chapters, so it's one continuous narrative, and you get the backstory on Astrid and Stella and their childhood. So that I'm really excited about. We have some more board books coming out. We just got the advanced copies for Yum 2-3, an ice cream counting book. which is a really, really fun kind of Technicolor counting book.
With glitter.
Gorgeous.
That counts scoops of ice cream. What kid does not love scoops of ice cream? We're also working on a couple of interactive books. One is called The Box of Feelings, which is a series of 6 die-cut books that for very, very little kids that explore different feelings. And in the Marvel series, we are about to release our Spider-Man book in that series. So that's, again, like kind of more of a 1 to 4 panel funny comics, putting Spider-Man in funny everyday situations, such as singing karaoke, his version of a Taylor Swift song, or like being in a Chinese noodle shop or whatever. It's very funny, and that's for older, kind of more middle grade and up readers. So those are some of our projects, but we publish 4 books a year with Abrams. So we're always busy writing and creating more books.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I can't wait for book 5. I can't wait to see the difference in how it's threaded.
It's a good one, I think.
Yeah. I'm excited about it.
So where can listeners find you online if they want to keep tabs on you to find those next books, or to just dive into your other creative adventures that you have?
Yeah. So you can find everything about us on our website, hellolucky.com. We're on Instagram at Hello Lucky Cards, which is more of our stationery stuff, and Hello Lucky Kids, which is our children's books. And I also have a Substack, Sabrina Moyle. It's called The Golden Bowl, but you can find me by searching Sabrina Moyle. And that's more essays and humorous articles about all things, but largely related to kind of personal growth and transformation and parenting. So anyway, that's another place where readers can find us.
Awesome. Oh, this is a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. I'm going to go get my bucket of markers and just doodle a little bit and revel in some creative energy that you have here. I know listeners will feel it too. And hopefully, they'll run out, they'll get this series and just pass it along to all the kids who I know are just going to be so excited and happy to get their hands on such a book. Thank you both for coming today. I loved our conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.